All right. So ever feel like you're kind of just winging it through life, like making it up as you go along?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Just hoping for the best, you know? But what if there was a better way? Like, what if you could actually define the code that runs your life? Like your own personal operating system.
An algorithm for living, almost.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we're diving into today. This is Ray Dalio's Principles.
It's interesting, right? Because Dalio, he's not some, armchair philosopher,
Yeah.
This guy built Bridgewater, one of the biggest hedge funds in the world.
Right.
So clearly he's figured a thing or two out.
Yeah, and made it onto that Forbes 400 list. So.
Exactly.
But here's the thing. Dalio's definition of success, it isn't just about, the money.
Right.
Or the fame. It's this whole other thing. Is he's really obsessed with this idea of aligning yourself with reality, no matter how brutal it might be.
Yeah, that's a big one for him.
Yeah. He calls it hyperrealism. And honestly, when I first read that, I was like, ooh, this sounds kind of dark.
It does have that rip the Band-Aid off kind of vibe, doesn't
Yeah.
it? But think about it. How often do our problems stem from not actually accepting how things are? From wishing things were different instead of figuring out how to work with what we've got.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. So it's not about, giving up on your dreams or anything.
No, not at all.
It's about being honest about the situation so you can actually achieve those dreams, right?
Exactly. It's about seeing the playing field for what it is so you can actually win the game.
Okay, I like that. I like that analogy. So Dalio uses this crazy analogy in the book, right?
Oh, yeah, he's got a lot of them.
He compares us humans to mold growing on an apple.
Mold on an apple.
I know, right? We think we're all complex and important.
Right.
But in the grand scheme of things, we're just like this tiny little blip.
It's a good dose of humility.
Right. So to succeed, you have to understand the rules of the universe, basically. The cause and effect of everything. And just work within those boundaries.
Precisely. He even goes so far as to link this to a sense of good, He argues that operating in harmony with those natural laws, it actually leads to better outcomes for everyone. It's about evolving, constantly seeking knowledge, and adapting to the environment.
Okay.
It's not just about reaching some fixed destination.
Okay, so that's the philosophy, the big picture. But how do we actually put this into practice?
Right.
So Dalio has this 5-step process he lays out. And it sounds pretty simple at first. You've got your goals, problems, diagnosis, design, and then tasks.
Right. Goals, problems, diagnose, design, and then tasks.
Yeah, but how does that help us from just spinning our wheels,
Well, think of it as a diagnostic tool.
Okay.
So say you're working towards something, you've got a goal, and you keep hitting a wall.
Right.
This process forces you to pinpoint exactly where you're going wrong.
Oh, okay.
Are you misdiagnosing the problem? Is your solution poorly designed? Or are you just bad at actually breaking it down into those actionable tasks?
See, that's where I think it gets interesting. Because I can totally see myself, getting stuck at the diagnosis stage.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe I don't want to admit that the real problem is, my own procrastination, right?
And that's where the rubber meets the road, right? It's about honesty and not just, surface level honesty. You got to dig deep and confront those uncomfortable truths about ourselves.
Okay, listener, time for some self-reflection here. Think about a goal you're struggling with. Which of those 5 steps really trips you up? Be honest.
Yeah, good question.
Now, Dalio gets even more interesting with this idea of your 2 U's and building a machine for success. This is where I started highlighting passages like crazy.
Right. It's he's opening up your brain and showing you the inner workings. So he says there's you one, the dreamer,
right.
The part of you that's all, I want this, I want that. Then there's you two, which is actual you have to work with. Your talents, your weaknesses, the whole package.
Right.
It's like the raw material.
And the machine is harnessing the power of both, right?
Exactly.
You one sets the goals, but you two has to figure out how to actually make it happen.
Exactly. It's about leveraging your strengths, being brutally honest about your weaknesses, and building a system that actually supports your goals.
Right.
Maybe that means delegating tasks you suck at, surrounding yourself with people who have skills you lack, or using tools and tech to amplify your efforts.
I love how he even suggests firing yourself from roles you're bad at.
That's a good one, right?
Yeah. It's such a radical idea, but it makes so much sense. Why keep banging your head against the wall when you could be focusing on what you excel at?
Totally. It flips the script on a lot of our traditional thinking, right?
Yeah.
We're so conditioned to believe we have to be good at everything. But Dalio's saying, hey, focus your energy where it matters most.
Right.
Now, he mainly applies this to building a company, but it's so relevant to our personal lives, too.
Oh, absolutely. I'm already thinking about my own little team, right?
Yeah.
My family, friends, colleagues. Like, how could this whole machine concept apply?
Right.
How can we better leverage each other's strengths and compensate for those weaknesses? It's a game changer.
Yeah, it's a powerful framework. And what's so powerful about this whole approach is it's not just some management theory he's come up with.
Right.
It's rooted in his own personal philosophy,
Yeah. Yeah, it's like he lives and breathes this stuff.
Exactly.
So like this whole idea of embracing mistakes, everyone says mistakes are okay.
Right.
But how do you actually build a culture where people feel safe to actually screw up?
Right.
To analyze what went wrong and learn from it, and without that fear of, getting punished.
It's huge, right? Moving from a blame culture to a learning culture.
Right.
And Dalio doesn't just talk about it. He lays out very specific strategies.
Yeah.
He's big on tools like what he calls issues logs, where teams actually document mistakes, they diagnose the root causes, and then they brainstorm solutions.
And this isn't optional at Bridgewater, right? Like, he's made it mandatory.
Exactly. He's convinced that baking this behavior into the company DNA is what fuels continuous improvement.
Right. Which kind of brings us to another one of his biggies, constant feedback.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one.
And we've touched on radical transparency in terms of, everyone having access to information.
Right.
But it goes way deeper than that. Like, it's about giving and receiving honest, direct feedback all the time.
Yeah, it's almost like that constant feedback loop.
Right.
And it's not just about hammering weaknesses. It's about acknowledging strengths, too.
Right. Finding that balance.
Exactly.
Like being straight up about areas for improvement, but also celebrating what's working well.
Yeah, because otherwise it's just like living under a microscope.
Right.
Constantly scrutinized.
Yeah, and I think, Dalio's pretty upfront about this. This kind of culture is not for everyone.
It's definitely intense. But
Yeah.
for those who thrive in that environment, it can be incredibly empowering.
Yeah, right. You learn faster, make better decisions.
You do your best work without the noise of office politics.
Right.
Or the fear of messing up.
Now, this might all sound like, it only applies if you're running a company.
Right.
But let's bring it back down to earth for our listeners.
Yeah.
Even if you're not the CEO, you're still leading in some way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right? Whether it's leading a team at work or managing a family, or even just taking charge of your own personal growth. Like, these principles, they really have legs.
They do.
Like, think about that idea of believability that we touched on earlier. Dalio is always pushing you to evaluate the source, understand their reasoning, weigh their input accordingly.
And in today's world, with information overload hitting us from every direction, news, social media, experts contradicting each other left and right, that skill is more crucial than ever.
Oh my gosh, it's overwhelming. How do you even filter it all?
Right, and that's exactly why this emphasis on critical thinking and believability is so valuable.
Okay.
It gives you a framework for navigating this information jungle.
Right.
And making smarter decisions.
So, listener, next time you're hit with some piece of advice, some bit of information, ask yourself, who's saying this?
Right.
What's their track record? What's their reasoning? Don't just blindly accept anything.
Exactly.
Even if it comes from, someone you respect.
And that goes for your own opinions, too, right?
Ooh, good point. Yeah.
Dalio's big on self-awareness, understanding your strengths and weaknesses, and recognizing when you might need to get a second opinion, or even a third.
He calls it triangulating your view.
Yeah.
Basically getting input from multiple believable people before making a big decision.
It's about acknowledging that you don't have all the answers. And that's okay.
Right.
Admitting what you don't know is often more valuable than clinging to what you think you know.
It's about cultivating that intellectual humility.
Right.
Being open to being wrong, to changing your mind. Constantly learning and evolving.
Yeah, which brings us full circle to that idea of personal evolution.
Right.
It's a never-ending journey, and it requires that openness to new information, that willingness to challenge your own assumptions, and that commitment to seeking truth even when it's uncomfortable.
Yeah. So there's this one concept that I think is super intriguing and potentially challenging.
Yeah, which one?
It's this whole design your machine concept.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
He uses this machine analogy to describe how we should approach achieving goals.
Right.
Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, he's essentially talking about seeing yourself and all your resources as components of a system.
Okay.
A system that's designed to achieve a specific outcome. And just like a well-oiled machine, each component needs to be carefully chosen, aligned, optimized to make sure that whole system runs smoothly.
So it's like zooming out and looking at the big picture.
Exactly. Instead of getting lost in the weeds of those daily tasks, it's thinking strategically about your goals, identify the roadblocks, and then designing solutions that systematically address those obstacles.
Okay.
That might mean assembling a team with diverse skills, delegating stuff you're not great at, creating processes to streamline your workflow, or even using technology to boost your efforts.
Right.
It's about leverage.
It sounds like it requires a certain level of detachment,
Oh, absolutely.
like being able to step back and objectively assess your own strengths and weaknesses,
Yeah.
and then making decisions based on what's best for the machine, even if it means letting go of tasks that you, like, personally enjoy doing
Right.
or think you're good at but maybe aren't the best person for.
You hit the nail on the head. It's about putting ego aside and focusing on what's going to get you the best results. And just like any machine, your system is going to need constant monitoring and adjustments.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Dalio's big on tracking progress, spotting problems early, diagnosing that root cause, and then tweaking or redesigning the system as needed.
So continuous optimization,
Exactly.
always striving for greater efficiency, right?
And this design your machine concept can be applied to all aspects of life. You know?
Yeah.
Think about your career. Are you strategically positioning yourself for success? Are you building the skills and relationships that you need to reach those long-term goals?
Or even your personal finances, right?
Yeah. Do you have a system in place for managing money, saving, investing, hitting your financial targets?
Right. It's about taking that strategic approach, that systems thinking approach,
Exactly.
applying it to every area of your life.
And Dalio's book is packed with practical advice and tools to help you do just that.
Right. Now, all this talk about systems and machines might sound a bit cold,
Yeah.
impersonal, right?
Yeah, I can see that.
But Dalio is very clear that relationships are vital to success.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Like he talks about hiring the right people, building strong teams,
Yeah.
fostering a culture of trust and open communication.
And he's not talking about superficial, let's all be friends relationships.
No, definitely not.
He's all about what he calls tough love, being honest, even brutally honest, about weaknesses and mistakes, but doing it with the intention of helping people grow.
It's about holding people to high standards, but giving them the support and guidance to reach those standards.
Exactly. It's creating an environment where people feel both challenged and supported, where they can really push themselves to reach their full potential.
We've talked a lot about the upsides of all this, but I'm guessing there's some potential downsides too, right? Like some people might find his approach too rigid, too demanding, maybe too focused on like logic and data at the expense of emotions and intuition.
Oh yeah, you're right. Those are valid concerns. And Dalio's the first to admit that his way of thinking and operating isn't for everyone. He even acknowledges that he made plenty of mistakes along the way.
Yeah, right. He's not claiming to be some perfect guru with all the answers.
Not at all. He's sharing his personal journey, his own set of principles that have worked for him,
Right.
and inviting others to consider them, test them out, see what resonates, and what needs tweaking to fit their values and circumstances.
Which is what makes Principles such a thought-provoking read, right?
It forces you to examine your own beliefs about success, decision-making, leadership, even life itself.
Right, right.
And even if you don't agree with everything Dalio says, it's hard to walk away from this book without a shifted perspective.
Now, there's one more piece of Dalio's philosophy that I think is super relevant today, especially.
What's that?
He talks about the importance of dealing with not knowing.
Yeah, and that's where his focus on critical thinking and believability really shines.
Right.
In a world overflowing with information, a lot of it unreliable or contradictory, it's crucial to develop that ability to separate truth from fiction, to question assumptions, to be comfortable with uncertainty.
It's about accepting that you don't have all the answers. And that's okay. In fact, embracing that not knowing can be incredibly freeing.
It really can. It frees you from the need to always be right, from the fear of making mistakes. It opens you up to new possibilities, new perspectives, new ways of thinking.
Allows you to be more adaptable, more resilient when faced with change and uncertainty, which, let's face it, is kind of the name of the game these days.
Right. The world's changing faster than ever.
Yeah. And Dalio actually has some concrete strategies for dealing with not knowing. He talks about asking good questions, seeking diverse viewpoints, testing assumptions, and being willing to change your mind when new evidence comes to light.
He encourages you to see uncertainty not as a threat, but as a chance to learn and grow.
Which is such a mindset shift.
And it's valuable both personally and professionally, because let's face it, we rarely have all the information we need to make perfect decisions.
Right.
So it's about getting comfortable with ambiguity, making the best decision you can with the information you have, and then being ready to adapt and course correct along the way.
It's about embracing that iterative process of learning, experimenting, constantly improving.
Right.
Recognizing that failure isn't the opposite of success.
Exactly.
It's part of the journey.
Which brings us right back to that core principle of evolution. Life isn't about reaching some fixed endpoint.
Right.
It's about constantly striving, adapting, and becoming better.
Right, and Dalio's principles, even with their potential drawbacks, they give you a really powerful framework for doing just that.
They do.
It's almost like he's saying, hey, get used to being a little off balance.
Right.
Because reality is a moving target, so you're constantly adjusting like your aim as you go, which honestly for me is kind of a relief.
Oh, yeah, totally.
It takes the pressure off perfection, right?
Absolutely. And it ties right back into that emphasis on open-mindedness. You have to be willing to let go of some of those cherished assumptions, to really consider other perspectives, even admit when you're wrong, which, let's face it, that can be tough.
Oh, tell me about it. We humans, we get so attached to our beliefs. It's almost like admitting we're wrong is like a personal attack or something.
It's totally understandable, but Dalio argues it's essential for growth, both for individuals and organizations. He even advocates for embracing conflict, those tough conversations where viewpoints clash, but not just for the sake of argument, of course.
Right, got to be productive.
Exactly. It's about disagreeing constructively with the goal of actually inching closer to the truth, to the best possible solution, even if that means you end up changing your own mind in the process, which, honestly, that's a sign of strength, not weakness.
So how do we actually foster that kind of environment, though, where people feel safe to disagree, to voice concerns, to push back, even if the idea came from, the boss? Because in a lot of workplaces, that takes serious guts.
It does, yeah. And Dalio gets super specific about the communication style that makes this possible. He talks about being assertive, yet open-minded, focusing on logic and reason, asking those questions like, is it true? Does it make sense? Instead of getting swept up in emotions or making it personal.
Easier said than done sometimes, though, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. We're all human. Those knee-jerk reactions are hard to avoid sometimes.
For sure.
But Dalio provides a framework for actually navigating those difficult conversations in a way that's both productive and respectful, which is, honestly, it's a pretty rare combo.
He also talks a lot about getting in sync, making sure everyone's on the same page, understanding each other's views, aligning on goals and priorities. That sounds crucial, but how do you actually make that happen, especially in like a big team or organization?
It's about creating that shared understanding, that sense of purpose.
Right.
That allows a team, a company, even a family to function smoothly towards a common goal. Now, listener, think about your own life. Are you truly in sync with the people that you work with, live with, collaborate with? Food for thought.
Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground here in this deep dive into Ray Dalio's principles. We've unpacked his hyperrealism, that 5-step process, his views on culture, on people, on transparency, on mistakes, on believability, even those more controversial ideas like radical transparency and embracing conflict.
And this was just a taste. The book's packed with even more insights and practical advice.
But the goal here wasn't to turn you into mini Dalios.
Right.
It was to give you a framework for your own thinking.
Exactly.
So it's not about blindly adopting every principle as your own.
It's about using them as a launching pad for self-reflection, questioning your own assumptions, designing your own machine for success, creating a life and career that truly align with what you value and where you want to go.
Now, Dalio's big on understanding and accepting reality. But what about when that reality just plain sucks? Like, when you want to change things,
Right.
how do these principles apply when you're not just navigating the world as it is, but like trying to make it better? To create something new, to solve a problem that nobody's cracked yet?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right.
And it's one we encourage you to wrestle with as you explore Dalio's work further and apply these principles to your own life.
Because that's kind of the magic of a deep dive like this. It's not about getting all the answers.
Exactly.
It's about asking the right questions, the ones that spark more reflection, more learning, more growth.
The kind of questions that stick with you long after the episode is over.
And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into Ray Dalio's principles.
We hope you found it as insightful and thought-provoking as we did.
Until next time, keep diving deep.